Even though I skated for a bit when I was a kid, I never truly considered myself a skater. But there was a moment when Tony Hawk's Pro Skater dropped in late '99 where it was all I wanted to be. And it wasn't just me that felt this way. This game inspired an entire generation to be different. This video is my attempt to figure out how a single PlayStation game reshaped culture, reshaped me, and made millions of us want to pick up a board. The series changed the way we dressed, the music we listened to, and even the way I saw the world. It helped turn an underground subculture into an Olympic sport and made being an outsider feel aspirational. It was a window into a world that felt untouchably cool, and everything about it made you want to be part of it. If this game is as empowering and accessible as we actually remember, maybe someone like me who hasn't skated in 25 years could go back and do the thing that we all dreamt of. Starting with a simple kickflipping game, and then on one of these things, and eventually on this. But before I break my controller, and probably every bone in my body, you kind of need to understand the guy whose name was on the box. The popularity of skateboarding had been rising and falling for decades since its inception in the late 40s, when Californian surfers decided they wanted a different board to ride when the waves weren't waving. By the time Tony came along in the early 80s, he was this wiry kid doing impossible things on vert ramps. He turned pro at 14, was sponsored by Vans and a bunch of other brands, and started winning literally everything. But as vert skating started dying out in the late 80s, indoor parks closed, and a new kind of skating started to take over: street. The shift was huge. Vert skating looked cool, but it wasn't accessible. With street skating, anyone could grab a board, find a stair set, and just go. That's where skate culture really started to develop its identity. And it's that mentality, the DIY, anti-establishment, fuck the rules vibe that the Tony Hawk games would eventually bottle up perfectly. With this new movement toward extreme sports firing up, ESPN asked the question, hey, how can we monetize this? Which led to the creation of X Games, a series of action sports events that would showcase alternative sports on a mainstream platform, one that Tony would again absolutely dominate. Alongside his passion for skating in real life, Hawk was also a proper arcade kid. There's even footage of him playing an old skating game called 720 at the world-renowned Twin Galaxies arcade. He also cut his teeth on games like Skate or Die, California Games, and Top Skater, which landed in '97. While all of these games were okay, they were either hard to pick up or just didn't capture the vibe of skating, so he always had the thought of making a game in the back of his mind. Because of his success on the board, he attracted the attention of a PC dev who was working on a skating game. He asked Hawk to start contacting publishers to get the word out there, but despite even speaking with Nintendo, they received no offers and the dream began to fade. But while all of this was happening, in Woodland Hills, California, another movement was starting that would change the course of the gaming industry. A handful of developers working at Malibu Interactive, who actually worked on Batman Returns on the Mega Drive, which was pretty sick, decided to part ways and form their own company, Neversoft Entertainment. They started life making a side-scroller called Skeleton Warriors, but would eventually come into contact with Activision to work on a game that would change extreme sports forever. Apocalypse, starring Bruce Willis. Wait, what? Yeah, so I had this game when I was a kid and I always assumed it was based on a movie I was too young to see, but nope, this was just a 3D action game that starred Bruce Willis for some reason.
Thought they had me there for a minute. Welcome to paradise.
Anyway, this got them rubbing shoulders with Activision, who decided to ask Neversoft to work on a prototype for a skating game using the engine they'd used for Apocalypse, which was kind of funny because no one at Neversoft had ever even skated. Once they had something playable, Neversoft wanted to attach someone to the project that would give it some credibility. And once they looked at whose face was plastered over every magazine in the extreme sports world, there was one obvious choice: They invited Tony to the studio and gave him a demo to play through, but they hadn't even swapped out the character model from Apocalypse yet. The version that he played literally had Bruce Willis with a gun attached to his back riding a skateboard, and despite that, Tony was sold on it immediately. What he tested was a game that was easy to pick up but hard to master, and he could see that potential from the get-go. Working with the studio as the face of the brand, the main motion capture actor, and as a consultant on skate culture, he wanted a game that captured the feeling of skating. Neversoft listened and developed a game that was fast, tight, and instantly satisfying. Just like one of the owners of the studio said here in what might be the worst impression of an American accent I've ever heard.
Dude, this game's really tight. Dude, is your game tight? Yeah, man, it's tight.
Tight, yeah!
The idea was to make a game that would either make skaters pick up a PlayStation or make you want to pick up a board. It goes without saying that they were successful on both counts, which leads me neatly onto the biggest challenge I'll face in this video.
You've got this new head filled up with smoke. I got my veins all tangled close to the jukebox bars, you freak.
I wanted to give myself the best chance of completing a kickflip in the next few weeks after having not slept on a board for over 20 years. So I went to this badass little skate shop nearby called Roller Snakes that had been running since the mid-80s. What's especially rad about this place is that it's not just a shop, it's exactly the kind of place I dreamed of visiting as a kid. My objectives were to buy a board, some pads, yes I know they're not cool, and gain a little bit of advice before I stepped on it for the first time. I'll be honest though, I was kind of intimidated walking in there. Sure, I was nervous about skating and wiping out as soon as I stepped on the board, but what bothered me the most was making sure they knew I wasn't just some kind of YouTube shill. I wanted to learn or relearn absolutely everything I could about skating over the next few weeks. I was genuinely taking this seriously. While I may not have skated for decades, there's a reason finding music for this video and making sure I had the right clothes to wear was so easy. I've been listening to this music for years. Some would argue I should find some new music, to be honest, and the clothes I'm wearing are what I've always worn. The folks in the store helped me choose a size of board that would work for me, so then I just had to find one I liked the look of. And it wasn't long until I spotted it. This board would be the one I'd learn with over the next few weeks, successfully or not. It was also an in-house brand, Heathen, which was pretty cool. While the deck was being built, the staff also gave me their thoughts on the challenge I'd set myself.
My boyfriend couldn't do a kickflip for 4 years.
Yeah,
Honestly,
I've heard this. Yeah.
if you really try and you're committed and are persistent over 3 weeks, I reckon you got it. As long as you get comfortable on your board today and just spend the day getting comfortable, I reckon you do have a chance. Because I've seen videos of people trying it and actually doing it.
With their words still ringing in my ears, I headed out onto the concrete to step onto the board for the first time, and it was not what I remembered.
Oh, well, I immediately feel terrified. Oh my God, I'm so scared.
I skated around a little bit, and I'd definitely forgotten how hard it was.
You look cool, Chris.
Seeing the pros manipulating the board so easily in the videos I grew up watching and chaining tricks together in game was absolutely not the experience I was having.
I'm going to fall over now, so I'm kind of semi-prepared for it, but can you ever be fully prepared for falling over?
But that's okay, it's a process, right?
I've just skated for the first time in I don't know, since I was 12 years old, which is a long time. And I never remember it being easy. I don't remember it being as hard as it was, because even standing on top of the board felt alien. You very quickly realise you're standing on a board that is attached to some wheels. Anyone who has ever skated probably realises that I'm an absolute moron at this point. But yeah, let's just see what happens. This is day one of all of this. So let's see what happens over the next few weeks. I'm not filled with hope, but hey, let's see what happens.
That was supposed to be the end of the day in terms of shooting, but when I got back to my buddy Chris's house, we were both already addicted to using the board. We ended up fucking around on it in the dark for a couple of hours straight. This will probably end up being a core memory for me, and I'd forgotten just how much fun this could be. But for now, I was going to head home to play more of the game, to dig into what made it feel so special.
I think you did it.
There had never been another skateboarding game that felt like THPS before. It allowed someone with no knowledge of the sport to boot up their PlayStation, pick up a controller and start stringing tricks together in minutes. To start with, you're shown a map, be that a warehouse, school or Area 51, and you'll be given a set of challenges to complete in a defined time. Some will be based on scoring points for combos, performing certain tricks, or things like grabbing collectible letters to spell out skate. Each map had a different flavour, and the challenges would reflect that. Later games would increase the variation in challenges, create open worlds, and even lovable characters like Ollie the Magic Bum. The game wasn't just fast and fun either, it taught you the lore of skateboarding. I watched a documentary on this, and Jamie Thomas, a pro skateboarder that appeared in the games, stressed that this lore wasn't common knowledge. Now a generation of people knew what a laser flip was before they'd even stepped on a board, which thinking back on it is mental. So actually, how easy was it to pick up and play? Well, for my first challenge, I need to complete a kickflip in-game. Oh, well that was easy. I wonder if every challenge will be like this. Looking back at it, it can look kinda simple, but it's important to remember that nothing else existed like it at this point. The kickflip is one of the simplest tricks you can land in the game, and the man credited with its creation was someone who melted my brain as a kid, Rodney Mullen. Mullen was, and still is, a ridiculously talented freestyle skater, and he's said to have developed the trick in the late 80s. While this isn't a video on the history of skating, he's also credited with creating the flat ground ollie, along with a couple of other tricks. Yeah, this guy's a joke. Tricks in the game were split into flips, grinds, grabs and special tricks, and pulling them off in isolation is actually pretty easy, but chaining them together to rack up high scores is one of the most satisfying feelings you can have as a gamer. Later games would introduce manuals as a way to chain tricks together further, and from THPS 3 onwards, the revert was introduced as a way to continue combos after big vert tricks too. The games made you feel like a pro, even if you'd never stepped on a board. Neversoft knew that they had something special brewing, and they were ready to get it into the hands of a wider audience, which led to it being released on maybe one of the most stacked demo discs ever. It ended up on the same disc as Final Fantasy VIII, Ape Escape and Crash Team Racing, and despite the clout the other games had, all anyone could talk about was how good THPS was. Even though it had just one 2-minute level set in an empty warehouse, it had replay value like nothing else we'd ever seen before. Because of that, Neversoft and Activision knew they had something powerful in the making and offered T-Dog $500,000 to buy him out of future royalties. At this moment in his career, he was pretty comfy after buying his first house and turned down the offer, which, in hindsight, was the smartest decision he'd ever made, especially because of what he was about to achieve. After being in development for 2 years, just a few months before its release, Hawk took the ceiling off what everyone thought was possible on a skateboard. Landing the 900 at X Games 5 in San Francisco catapulted him into an even higher level of stardom and put skateboarding on the highest pedestal it had ever achieved. And as soon as Tony's deck hit the ramp, Neversoft scrambled to make sure the 900 was included in the game, and they delivered. On September 29th, 1999, Tony Hawk's Pro Skater hit the shelves and the world of extreme sports was changed forever. This game captured the pure grit and radical feel of skateboarding, delivering it in near-perfect form onto the PlayStation with a mastery and sense of programming finesse beyond anyone's imagination. This is what Doug Perry of IGN wrote in his review in '99. The game was a cultural shockwave. It flew off the shelves, earned rave reviews and established skateboarding in the mainstream. Cole Nowicki wrote a book about its impact where he said that the game was a Trojan Horse entering the homes of millions worldwide, exposing kids, teenagers, their parents and more to this gamified version of skateboarding. Across its lifetime, the first game sold over 7 million copies worldwide, which doesn't even make it the best-selling game of the series. That crown belongs to the third game, which sold an even more ridiculous 7.5 million copies. Across the entire franchise, it's estimated that they've sold about $1.4 billion worth of THPS games. Yeah, billion, with a B, for big ass titties. The game and skateboarding in general were absolutely everywhere and became impossible to ignore. It showed up in The Simpsons along with a cameo from both the Hawkster himself and Blink-182 in what might be one of my favourite episodes of The Simpsons ever.
You're going down, Homer, then back up, then down, and back up again. That's how the game is played.
This was like the era of the Misfit becoming cool, but I'll touch more on that later on. For now, I want to talk about another new product that was hitting the shelves.
So I just woke up on day 2. I'm aching in places on my legs that I didn't even know I had places. And I want to do some skating today, but this is what it looks like outside. Look at this brave boy.
Good boy. You're so brave. You're so brave.
I guess this is why skateboarding was invented in sunny California and not Birmingham, England. With the weather being absolute dog shit, I figured it was time to start practicing with the tool I'd need for my second challenge, the tech deck. Tech decks, or fingerboards as they're known, seem to appear out of nowhere when I was a kid, but in the blink of an eye, everyone had one. I definitely had one too, but I'm pretty sure, just like real skating, I was trash at using it. Despite that, I was really excited to try it again because look at them, they're so cute. But first, I needed to build one. The novelty wore off a real damn fast, let me tell you. I could not get this thing to do anything that I wanted it to do, and my first hour with it was genuinely embarrassing, to the point where I considered removing this challenge from my script entirely. I need to put a lot more time into this, so I'll come back to this in a little bit. For now, let's get back to one element I've touched on a little that I really need to expand on. I grew up in a neighborhood where every kid left the womb in a tracksuit, and at best, a pair of the bluest jeans you've ever seen for formal occasions. It was an era of overly gelled hair and tacky light-up trainers, which still go really fucking hard, and I really think we should bring these back. So when THBS came out and a whole generation of kids saw Chad Muska, Kareem Campbell, and Bam Margera hit magazines, it was like, what? You can actually be different, and that's good? Every video I saw of someone skating just looked so effortless and carefree, even though it definitely wasn't. And that carried over into the clothes they wore. Again, it was like this aspirational level of not giving a fuck that was unheard of. Around this time, we were already well into the MTV era, and there was one show launched in October 2000 that went hand in hand with skate culture in the most beautiful way possible too. As an impressionable kid, Jackass taught me that meeting up with my friends and piling into shopping carts just to fall back out of them was a productive use of my time.
Warning, the following show features stuff.
Shut up, Knoxville. Me and my buddies are about to launch ourselves into a hedge. As a kid who hated, and I mean hated, school, seeing this level of delinquency was just what I needed. I even used to tape the show from MTV so I could watch it in the morning before I went to school to G me up for a day of classrooms, stale burgers, and monotony. While I was part of a big friend group at school, I was basically anonymous. I played sports, but I was never really great at anything. I wasn't a misfit, but I was also never popular. Watching things like CKY, Jackass, Dirty Sanchez, and playing games like Tony Hawk's Pro Skater made me realize it was alright to be a little bit different. It's probably why I dropped out of sixth form college when I was like 16 to go and join a band, but that's maybe for a different video. THBS2 doubled down on this feeling when it introduced Creator Skater 2. Now you could have your own virtual skater doll so you could see exactly how you'd look, repping the gear your favourite skaters were all sponsored by. I'd never seen shoes so chunky or trousers so baggy. But most importantly, I'd never seen a group of people where I was just like, yes, that's it, right there, that is who I am. And 20 years later, I'm back trying to be that kid again, even if my ankles have other plans. Day 3 arrived and it was starting to look like I'd be able to skate today until the rain picked up again. That beautiful British weather, eh? I really didn't want to wait another day to get back on the board though. So I swept the patio for the first time in 6 years and tried to get used to just standing on the damn thing. Constantly squirming under your feet, and if you've never stood on one before, you have no idea how unnatural it feels. I realised quickly that the patio was not level, full of bumps and cracks, and was way too wet. I was also worried about caving my skull in on the walls around me, so I decided to shift onto an area by the grass. It was probably dumb, but I figured I'd try and work on my ollie now on the wet ground with my wet shoes and no pads. But once I'd stopped unintentionally rolling out of shot after several attempts, actually got off the ground. You see that? That's me, in the air, on a skateboard. Okay, it's not the highest vertical you'll ever see, but this was a huge moment for me, and it actually made me think, hold up, is this kickflip thing actually going to be possible? I couldn't practice any longer because the rain was picking up again and I didn't want to waterlog the board, but I went back inside with renewed hope and an insatiable desire to listen to punk rock. In the first video I ever made on this channel, almost exactly a year ago actually, I spoke about the nostalgia of video game audio, and a big chunk of that was the music from the THPS games. Ah, shit. The link between music and these games is inescapable. THPS was a trailblazer in adding music from real bands, and it didn't just promote them to a new audience. In some cases, it catapulted them to new heights. John Feldman, the vocalist from Goldfinger whose song Superman became synonymous with the first game, mentioned this in an interview he did.
And we played the set, and no one really gave a shit about our band. We were opening for the Bloodhound Gang. Then we play Superman, it's like the entire place goes fucking ballistic. Like full circle, play everyone's stage, I mean, it's just crazy, right? It's intense. I'm like, what the fuck, man? The game completely changed the trajectory of my band.
I chose all of the music in this video from bands that have featured in one of the games or Jackass over the years. And this shit ain't cheap, by the way, so I hope you're enjoying it. Jackass even had full-blown rock stars showing up in their videos too. Gene Simmons, Henry Rollins and Tommy Lee all appeared on Jackass. Later on Viva La Bam, him would appear from time to time, and Slayer even played a show in his backyard. For a lot of kids, this would have been their first exposure to alternative music, and if it was, I guarantee some of these songs are still on their playlists today. Even if you didn't love the music on the games, it opened the door to entirely new genres of music that would have been otherwise difficult to stumble on as a kid in the late 90s and early 2000s. These games, shows and movies, alongside WWF themes and the songs they used in promos, single-handedly tossed me the key to Kazaa and LimeWire for a good few years. The fact that these supposed misfits were knocking about with rock stars and actual Brad Pitt once again showed you that you didn't need to follow the mainstream to be cool.
Brad Pitt got kidnapped.
Also, the fact that even decades later, the Jackass cast are still getting into trouble is hilarious to me. As a wrestling fan, seeing Brock Lesnar slam Wee Man through a table in a bar will never not be funny to me. After losing another day to the weather, I woke up on day 4 to a hell of a sight. With the weather finally taking a turn for the better, I headed to a skate park by my buddy Knuckles' house and got to work just trying to feel comfortable on the board. It was the first time since the day I picked it up that I'd actually had a chance to practice moving around a large area. Here I also met Izzy, an actually talented skater and an all-round sweetheart who really showed me the ropes. He taught me a ton about foot placement, committing to certain moves, and most importantly, loosening up.
I'm already very tired. Very, very tired. He's showing me up.
I was hardly a natural, but this was starting to feel good. It was the first time where I felt like things were coming together. And it did help to have 2 people there celebrating the little wins I was earning, and also my turbo mid ollies.
Fuck yeah.
Another day to file away in the core memories folder. Cheers, boys. I gave Knuckles one of my tech decks as a heartfelt gesture of gratitude, but on the night I saw this video on socials. I had to censor it because my beloved tech deck was now carrying a disturbingly accurate depiction of a dude's miniature dick. With THPS seeing crazy levels of success, in 2001 Activision made the decision to spin up a new arm of the company called Activision O2, with a focus on the extreme sports genre. Using the Tony Hawk blueprint, they created Matt Hoffman's Pro BMX, Sean Palmer's Pro Snowboarder, Kelly Slater's Pro Surfer, and Wakeboarding Unleashed featuring Sean Murray. But it wasn't just Activision trying to capitalize on the Hawks' success. Acclaim entered the fray with Dave Mirra's Freestyle BMX, Aggressive Inline, and the beloved dumpster fire that was BMX XXX. But it was EA's entrance into the market that would eventually contribute to THPS's downfall, starting with SSX as a franchise and SSX Tricky that was introduced in 2001. Also, did you know that SSX stood for Snowboard Supercross? The fuck is that about? Despite the competition, THPS was still the king of the genre and it would remain that way for years on end, but nothing lasts forever. You know how some challenges can be fascinating to unpick? Drilling into the minutiae of why something is difficult and transforming it into something easy can be invigorating. Well, that's absolutely not the case for me and tech decks. It seems like my brain only has two modes when it comes to problem solving. One, fail, troubleshoot, understand, conquer. And two, smash the thing to fucking bits. Tech decks fall into the latter category. I don't want to crash out too hard on YouTube, but I just cannot wrap my brain around doing a kickflip on this thing, and I've watched plenty of tutorials on it. This one feels like something I just cannot do, which I'll admit has kind of got me a bit nervous about the bigger challenge here. And yet, in the midst of shooting, I discovered that just flipping this thing around was ridiculously fun. I completely lost sight of the kickflip challenge when I just allowed myself to be a dick for a second and started firing this thing around my mate's living room. Okay, I didn't land a kickflip, but I did land whatever the hell this thing is. That's gotta count for something, right? If I fail in the final challenge not landing a kickflip but land a fucking laser flip, you bet your ass I'll be counting that as a win. Based on how excited I got after landing this, I can't bring myself to call it a failure. Not total success, but I can at least give myself 5 out of 10, something that THPS would have begged for at one point. After over half a decade at the top of the mountain, much like my back, the series was beginning to creak. The yearly cadence of the game, much like other sports games, was beginning to fatigue the game's audience, and I'll admit that even I dropped off the series after its 7th entry in as many years. When you release a game yearly, how much room does that really leave for innovation? Looking at you, Call of Duty. THPS suffered from that, and while they tried to add new features, nothing quite hit like those first few games. Activision, who at the time was still flying high after the introduction of plastic peripherals in 2005 with Guitar Hero, decided to try something similar with skateboarding. Tony Hawk's Ride and Shred were released, allowing you to use a plastic skateboard as a motion controller, but it just didn't land, excuse the pun. EA dropped Skate in 2007, which offered a new, exciting way to control a skateboard, and over 3 years kept iterating to create a really special game. After Shred, 5 years passed until a new THPS game was released, when Activision tried to recapture the magic, releasing Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 5, and it was not great. Sloppy graphics, bugs, and the addition of a poorly designed slam feature meant that the game copped a whopping 32 out of 100 lifetime score on Metacritic, which is a bit of a heartbreaker. It sold just 500,000 copies, which pales in significance to the series' highs of over 7 million. It seems like the culture had just changed. I played a fair bit of Skate 3, but even then, it didn't hit the same as it did before. The drop-off in skating games directly coincided with me falling away from skating in general, and coming back to it now is definitely harder. Without that groundswell of hype, it doesn't feel like you're being swept up in a cultural movement anymore. My body aches more than it used to, and the ground definitely hasn't gotten any softer. The magic just feels a lot further away now, but it's definitely not entirely gone. Activision O2 died, and Neversoft was officially defunct as of 2014, with its employees being merged into Infinity Ward, who would go on to make Call of Duty Ghosts, which I liked. I don't know about you, but I actually thought it was pretty good. The licensing deal between Tony Hawk and Activision lapsed in 2015, and just when it felt like the series was dead and buried. Five years later, in May 2020, it was announced that Vicarious Visions had been working on a remake of both the first and second game. But this was hallowed ground they were walking on. Could anything they did realistically live up to the hype? Well, they fucking nailed it. Let's go! It became the fastest selling game in the franchise, with over 1 million copies sold in the first 2 weeks alone. Here in the UK, it was the biggest launch for the franchise since Underground, and was the second biggest launch in the series overall. Obtaining the game's original code, Vicarious Visions had meticulously layered their own modernised version to make sure it handled like the original, but with some much needed quality of life improvements. They remade every single piece of art in the game so that it was ready for the jump to 4K resolution, and even worked with the original Neversoft development team to make sure that the original skating lines were consistent with the OG. The reviews were insane too, commending its dedication to staying true to the original while also adding in some new, younger skaters and a raft of new music to complement the original tracks. Just like that, 21 years later, fans of the original had a revamped version to sink their wheels into, and a new generation got to discover it for the first time. For me, booting it up brought back all of those old delusions again, and suddenly, skating was exciting again, which brings me full circle to why I made this video. Over the weeks it took to produce this, I was still streaming, especially on my off days where I had somewhere to complain about how much my back was hurting. Thankfully I have a community on Twitch that was still super supportive, even if I wasn't at my best during this whole skating thing, and it was rad to be able to share some of my progress while I was live. If you want to get involved next time, come along to a stream or come and join the Discord with the link below. I will make sure you subscribe if you're enjoying this video so far. Win or lose, I was going to try my best to nail this kickflip. Over the next week or so, I kept practicing on the board, wondering if I had any chance of actually completing it on this infernal machine. Some days were amazing, some days not so much. I skated at a bunch of different parks as I tried to dodge shitty English weather and even ice on colder days. Why did I pick November to do this video? But I just could not bring myself to give up. And how could I with my self-imposed deadline fast approaching? And before I knew it, that day arrived. And once again, it had rained. After driving around to several soggy skate parks, I stumbled across a cool bridge covered in graffiti that had this little ghetto skate park in it. While it wasn't pretty, it was actually perfect. So I slapped my board down and started trying to kickflip like my life depended on it. With every pop of the tail and every flick of the board, I learned a little bit more. Aside from the glaringly obvious technical limitations, I also found that my cardio was totally cooked. Who'd have thought that just trying to kickflip could blow you up this much? It shocked me how much of this was a battle of coordination. There are so many micro and macro steps involved in pulling this off, and it's never just jumping in the air and flicking the board. It's about the position of your feet, your balance, your squat position and angle of your body relative to the floor. Then it's popping the tail off the ground with one foot, quickly jumping up, and then rolling the other foot toward the nose and delicately flicking it out with your toes to get the board to spin. Whenever I felt like I got one part of that process down, it felt like another part of it fell out of my brain. I kept on trying until I eventually took a proper whack to the calf that would go on to ache for like 3 days. And it was at this moment that it just felt impossible to me. So I needed to ramp up the pressure to give it one final push.
So, I'm not really making much in the way of progress. So, I'm going to give it 10 more shots. 10 more. At least it kind of puts like a cap on it. Or maybe it'll inspire me to do something.
While my 9th effort was admittedly complete garbage, I knew that I had one more in me with the entire journey from the last few weeks leading up to this final attempt. As I balanced on the board with the prowess of a whippet on a laminate floor, I couldn't help but think back to the adventure I'd been on over the past few weeks. But now that journey was about to end with this one last attempt at a kickflip. And I failed. Despite all of my effort, all of the videos I'd watched, the aches and pains I had, and the advice I was given, I couldn't do it. I couldn't even get close. If you've been rooting for me throughout this entire ordeal, trust me, I felt it. As I left that ghetto little skate spot, it was hard not to be a little bit bummed out. But then I really started thinking about everything that had led to this point. How helpful the folks at Roller Snakes were, prattling about with Chris outside his house, how kind and supportive Knuckles and Izzy had been, and how much cleaner my patio was now it had been swept. I thought about how infuriating the tech deck was before I ended up actually having a blast with it once I stopped focusing on the kickflip and started just allowing myself to have fun. Going back and watching hours of old skate videos, listening to the incredible music and reliving the golden era of skating. I'd had such a ridiculous amount of fun, and none of this would have happened if I hadn't picked up THPS when I was little. The impact the Tony Hawk's Pro Skater series had on me and now multiple other generations cannot be downplayed. It's the kind of franchise that wasn't just loved by millions of people, it had the opportunity to define their music taste, their attitude, their character, their style. I don't know how many other games can make that claim. While I may not have been able to land a kickflip, and at the risk of using a phrase like, maybe the real kickflip was the memories I made along the way, the adventure of making this video is something I'll never forget. It allowed me to meet new people that were a lot cooler than me. I made memories with friends that I'll still laugh about in 10 years' time. And for a few weeks, I got to be that kid again. The one who booted up THPS for the first time and suddenly felt like I could be different. Even though I may not be cut out to be a pro skater, at least I can still indulge in that delusion by playing one of my favourite games. I'm also still delusional enough to think I might land one someday. Just maybe off camera. That's all for this one. If you haven't already, make sure you subscribe on your way out, and I will catch you in the next one, which will hopefully involve a lot less physical pain because my God, my body is busted. Holy heck.